Hello. If you have watched my other videos, you know that I'm not an atheist by any means. However, that does not mean I don't have my doubts at times. Perhaps one of the most poignant arguments against a Judeo-Christian view of God is that by Fyodor Dostoyevsky in the brothers Karamazov. I don't believe he was an atheist either. Yet this conversation from the following story is one that I would love to get an intelligible answer from someone on, in defense of the Judeo-Christian worldview. So far, when I present this argument, I have really only gotten a kind of you just have to have faith response, and that's not for us to understand. Which could be the case, but if someone does have an answer, please reply, because that'd be great. I'd love to hear it. Alright. So let's get to it. This is from the brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. This is an excerpt. Just a couple pages. Well, tell me where to begin. Give your orders. The existence of God, eh? Begin where you like. You declared yesterday at Father's that there was no God. Alyosha looked searchingly at his brother. I said that yesterday at dinner on purpose to tease you, and I saw your eyes glow. But now I've no objection to discussing with you, and I say so very seriously. I want to be friends with you, Alyosha, for I have no friends and want to try it. Well, only fancy. Perhaps I too accept God, laughed Ivan. That's a surprise for you, isn't it? Yes, of course, if you're not joking now. Joking? I was told at the elders yesterday that I was joking. You know, dear boy, there was an old sinner in the 18th century who declared that if there was no God, he would have to be invented. And man has actually invented God. And what's strange, what would be marvelous, is not that God should really exist. The marvel is that such an idea, the idea of the necessity of God, could enter the head of such a savage, vicious beast as man. So holy it is, so touching, so wise, and so great a credit it does to man. As for me, I've long resolved not to think whether man created God or God man. For what are we aiming at now? I am trying to explain as quickly as possible my essential nature. That is, what manner of man am I, what I believe in, and for what I hope. That's it, isn't it? And therefore I will tell you that I accept God simply. But you must note this. If God exists, and if he really did create the world, then all we know, he created it according to the geometry of Euclid and the human mind with the conception of only 3 dimensions in space. Yet there have been, and still are, geometricians and philosophers, and even some of the most distinguished, who doubt whether the whole universe, or so to speak, more widely the whole of being, was only created in Euclid's geometry. They even dare to dream that 2 parallel lines, which according to Euclid can never meet on Earth, may meet somewhere in infinity. I have come to the conclusion that since I can't understand even that, I can't expect to understand about God. I acknowledge humbly that I have no faculty for settling such questions. I have a Euclidean earthly mind, and how could I solve problems that are not of this world? And I advise you never to think about it either, my dear Alyosha, especially about God, whether he exists or not. All such questions are utterly inappropriate for a mind created with an idea of only 3 dimensions, and so I accept God, and am glad to. And what's more, I accept his wisdom, his purpose, which are utterly beyond our ken. I believe in the underlying order and the meaning of life. I believe in the eternal harmony in which they say we shall one day be blended. I believe in the word to which the universe is striving, and which itself was with God, and which itself God, and so is God, and so on to infinity. There are all sorts of phrases for it. I seem to be on the right path, don't I? Yet, would you believe it? In the final result, I don't accept this world of God's. And although I know it exists, I don't accept it at all. It's not that I don't accept God, you understand. It's the world created by him I don't and cannot accept. Let me make it plain. I believe, like a child, that suffering will be healed and made up for, that all the humiliating absurdity of human contradictions will vanish like a pitiful mirage, like the despicable fabrication of the impotent and infinitely small Euclidean mind of man, that in the world's finale, at the moment of eternal harmony, something so precious will come to pass that it will suffice for all hearts, for the comforting of all resentments, for the atonements of all the crimes of humanity, of all the blood they've shed, that it will make it not only possible to forgive, but to justify all that has happened with men. But though all that may come to pass, I don't accept it. I won't accept it. Even if parallel lines do meet and I see it myself, I shall see it and say that they've met, but I still won't accept it. That's what's at the root of me, Alyosha. That's my creed. Do you understand why this infamy must be and is permitted? Without it, I am told man could not have known good and evil. Why should he know that diabolical good and evil when it costs so much? Why, the whole world of knowledge is not worth that child's prayer to dear kind God. I say nothing of the sufferings of grown-up people. They have eaten the apple, damn them, and the devil take them all. But these little ones, I am making you suffer, Alyosha. You are not yourself. I'll leave it off if you like. Never mind, Never mind, I want to suffer too, muttered Alyosha. One picture, only one more, because it's so curious, so characteristic, and I have only just read it in some collection of Russian antiquities. I've forgotten the name, I must look it up. It was in the darkest days of serfdom at the beginning of the century, and long lived the liberator of the people. There was in those days a general aristocratic connections, the owner of great estates, one of these men somewhat exceptional, I believe, even then, who, retiring from the service of a life of leisure, are convinced that they've earned absolute power over the lives of their subjects. There were such men then. So our general, settled on his property of 2,000 souls, lives in pomp and domineers over his poor neighbors as though they were dependents and buffoons. He has kennels of hundreds of hounds and nearly 100 dog boys, all mounted and in uniform. One day, a serf boy, a little child of 8, threw a stone in play and hurt the paw of the general's favorite hound. Why is my favorite dog lame? He is told that the boy threw a stone that hurt the dog's paw. So you did it. The general looked the child up and down. Take him. He was taken. Taken from his mother and kept shut all night. Early that morning the general comes out on horseback with the hounds, his dependents, dog boys, and huntsmen, all mounted around him in full hunting parade. The servants are summoned for their edification, and in front of them all stands the mother of the child. The child is brought from the lockup. It's a gloomy, cold, foggy autumn day, a capital day for hunting. The general orders the child to be undressed. The child is stripped naked. He shivers, numb with terror, daring not to cry. Make him run, commands the general. Run, run, shout the dog boys. The boy runs. At him, yells the general. And he sets the whole pack of hounds on the child. The hounds catch him, and tear him to pieces before his mother's eyes. I believe the general was afterwards declared incapable of administering his estates. Well, what did he deserve? To be shot? To be shot for the satisfaction of our moral feelings? Speak, Alyosha. To be shot, murmured Alyosha, lifting his eyes to Ivan with a pale, twisted smile. Bravo, cried Ivan delightedly. If even you say so, you're a pretty monk. So there is a little devil sitting in your heart, Alyosha Karamazov. What I said was absurd, but that's just the point, that but, cried Ivan. Let me tell you, novice, that the absurd is only too necessary on earth. The world stands on absurdities, and perhaps nothing would have come to pass in it without them. We know what we know. What do you know? I understand nothing, Ivan went on, as though in delirium. I don't want to understand anything now. I want to stick to the fact. I made up my mind long ago not to understand. If I try to understand anything, I shall be false to the fact, and I have determined to stick to the fact." "Why are you trying me?" Alyosha cried with sudden distress. "Will you say what you mean at last?" "Of course I will. That's what I've been leading up to. You are dear to me. I don't want to let you go, and I won't give you up to your Zosima." Ivan, for a minute, was silent. His face became all at once very sad. "Listen. I took the case of the children only to make my case clear. Of the others' tears of humanity with which the earth is soaked from its crust to its center, I will say nothing. I have narrowed my subject on purpose. I am a bug, and I recognize in all humanity that I cannot understand why the world is arranged as it is. Men are themselves to blame, I suppose. They were given paradise, they wanted freedom, and stole fire from heaven, though they knew they would become unhappy, so there is no need to pity them. With my pitiful earthly Euclidean understanding, all I know is that there is suffering, and that there are none guilty, that cause follows effect, simply and directly, that everything flows and finds its level. But that's only Euclidean nonsense. I know that, and I can't consent to live by it. What comfort is it to me that there are none guilty, and that cause follows effect simply and directly, and that I know it? I must have justice, or I will destroy myself. And not justice in some remote infinite time and space, but here on earth, and that I should see myself. I have believed in it. I want to see it, and if I am dead by then, let me rise again, for if it all happens without me, it will be too unfair. Surely I haven't suffered, simply that my crimes and my sufferings may manure the soil of the future harmony for someone else. I want to see with my own eyes the hind lie down with the lion, and the victim rise up and embrace his murderer. I want to be there when everyone suddenly understands what it has all been for. All the religions of the world are built on this longing, and I am a believer. But then there are the children, and what am I to do about them? That's a question I can't answer. For the 100th time I repeat, there are numbers of questions, but I've only taken the children because in their case, what I mean is so unanswerably clear. Listen. If all must suffer to pay for the eternal harmony, what have children to do with it? Tell me, please. It's beyond all comprehension why they should suffer, and why they should pay for that harmony. Why should they, too, furnish material to enrich the soil for the harmony of the future? I understand solidarity in sin among men. I understand solidarity in retribution, too. But there can be no such solidarity with children. And if it is really true that they must share responsibility for all their father's crimes, such a truth is not of this world, and is beyond my comprehension. Some jester will say, perhaps, that the child would have grown up and have sinned, but you see, he didn't grow up. He was torn to pieces by the dogs at 8 years old. Oh, Alyosha, I'm not blaspheming. I understand, of course, what an upheaval of the universe it will be, when everything in heaven and earth blends in one hymn of praise, and everything that lives and has lived cried aloud, Thou art just, O Lord, for thy ways are revealed. When the mother embraces the fiend who threw her child to the dogs, and all three cry aloud with tears, Thou art just, O Lord, then of course the crown of knowledge will be reached, and all will be made clear. But what pulls me up here is that I can't accept that harmony, and while I am earth, and while I am on earth, I make haste to my own measures. You see, Alyosha, perhaps it really may happen that if I live to the moment, or rise again to see it, I too, perhaps, may cry aloud with the rest, looking at the mother embracing the child's torturer, Thou art just, O Lord, but I wouldn't want to cry aloud then. While there is still time, I hasten to protect myself, and so I renounce the higher harmony altogether. It's not worth the tears of that one tortured child who beat itself upon the breast with its little fist and prayed in its stinking outhouse with its unexpiated tears to dear kind God. It's not worth it, because those tears are unatoned for. They must be atoned for, or there can be no harmony. But how? How are you going to atone for them? Is it possible? By their being avenged? But what do I care for avenging them? What do I care for a hell for oppressors? What good can hell do, since those children have already been tortured? And what becomes of harmony if there is hell? I want to forgive. I want to embrace. I don't want more suffering. And if the suffering of children go to swell the sum of sufferings which was necessary to pay for truth, then I protest that the truth is not worth such a price. I don't want the mother to embrace the oppressor who threw her son to the dogs. She dare not forgive him. Let her forgive him for herself if she will. Let her forgive the torturer for the immeasurable suffering of her mother's heart. But the suffering of her tortured child she has no right to forgive. She dare not forgive the torturer, even if the child were to forgive him. And if that is so, if they dare not forgive, what becomes of harmony? Is there in the world a being who would have the right to forgive and can forgive? I don't want harmony. From love for humanity, I don't want it. I would rather be left with the unavenged suffering. I would rather remain with my unavenged suffering and unsatisfied indignation, even if I were wrong. Besides, too high a price is asked for harmony. It's beyond our means to pay so much to enter on it. And so I hasten to give back my entrance ticket, and if I am an honest man, I am bound to give it back as soon as possible. And that I am doing. It's not God that I don't accept, Alyosha. Only I must respectfully return him the ticket. That's rebellion, murmured Alyosha, looking down. Rebellion? I'm sorry you call it that, said Ivan earnestly. One can hardly live in rebellion, and I want to live. Tell me yourself, I challenge you. Answer. Imagine that you are creating a fabric of human destiny with the object of making men happy in the end, giving them peace and rest at last, but that it was essential and inevitable to torture to death only one tiny creature, that baby beating its breast with its fist, for instance, and to found that edifice on its unavenged tears. Would you consent to be the architect on those conditions? Tell me, and tell me the truth. No, I wouldn't consent, said Alyosha softly.